Let's move over to the topic of instruments. You have a lot of amazing instruments and you seem very capable on the technological side as well. Let's start with software. Tell us about the software that you use.
Well, actually, as a DAW, I prefer Studio One. I have version 5.2, the complete version. It comes, of course, as you know, with a plugin suite, which is really handy. I mean, they don't really act to me as dismissible stock plugins that you cannot really mix with. I can't say I'm a great mixer, but I'm I think a good recorder and a rather patient editor. So I'm trying to learn how to mix. I have a teacher. Whenever we find time, we have lessons on Zoom and such. I watch tutorials and such. I also can use Ableton Live with 10. I have been doing live performances, done some recording. So besides the AWs, what I usually use is, of course, third-party plugins. I'm, as you know, representing KB331 Synthmaster, so I know that software very well, obviously. But besides that, I have been using also other soft synths and other controllers too. For instance, Rolly, I have the Songmaker kit that comes with a very interesting plugin suite. It's got its equator as synth. Besides, it's got this very interesting drum interface, this light pad block, and that's what I learned how to create loops with. I also do have a Machine MK3, which I barely can use yet. So I never had the time to spend on it. I should learn it this summer better because I know it's very powerful and very capable, and I'm not doing it justice. As MIDI controllers, I have a collection of lightweight travel keyboards, actually, many of them, since my main task for Synthmaster was actually to represent and try the mobile products wherever I go. Before COVID, it was a lot of places, actually. I was going to all the IMSTA events, to London, to Berlin, to overseas, to Canada, actually. And everything is right now, of course, grounded. I have an open ticket to Canada, for instance. And besides many conferences, of course, for the academia side. So that's why I was just taking an iPad or an iPhone and with a MIDI controller like the X Key by, it's right now, it's a brand is represented by Artesia Pro. So I was just making music at the seaside somewhere in Thailand. That really I enjoyed so much. I hope we go back to that life, that pre-COVID vibe, so to speak. So for small MIDI controllers, I have a collection. That's why I got the Maker kit too. As a big MIDI controller, I don't have much. I'm usually using one of my smaller Roland keyboards here. It's an XPS 10. I'm a local Roland artist for Turkey. That doesn't mean much, actually. They just give me a discount, actually. They don't do much else.
That's still
I
pretty cool. I'm a Roland fan, so.
Really? I have made piano videos for them. It's a big series that was watched altogether in the millions. So people know me as a piano instructor. So that was sort of the exchange with Roland Turkey, I would say. So besides, I have many Roland keyboards, as you can see. This is my favorite one.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, he's gorgeous, isn't he?
Very
It's
much
an
so.
yeah, it's an axe edge, and well, it is hard to learn the guitar at first, especially if you're a classically trained pianist. But once you do, you can really shred on it. So I have been doing a lot of stage stuff with this. Well, it is my sort of signature instrument right now, but I also love my big hard synths behind me. I have the Roland FA08, the Jupiter 50. My love affair with the Vicent GT recently actually brought me one. It's hard to
Wow.
find, the Vicent GT is even rare on reverb.com.
Really?
So when
Wow.
I found, yeah, I mean, it is rare. It's not a vintage synth by any means. It's a 2007 release, but it was a very powerful synth. I think more powerful than Roland intended. So it didn't really complete its shelf life, I would say.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's still
Roland.
popular. It's still popular, so I got that too. And I have the small JDXI. That's really a very little hard nut to
It,
crack.
it is. So I'm going to do my reveal.
Yeah.
My JDXI.
Oh, you have it there too. I love the machine. I mean, it's really such a great thing.
It
For
has.
that price, you can't get anything better.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy it as something just to pick up and get an idea out there, put up a demo, maybe come back to it later and flesh it out some more. Roland's good for that. They're good for throwing out products that you can utilize in any situation.
Indeed, indeed. I also have the Access Virus TI. I don't know if you can see. It's the white one at the bottom.
Yep.
And of course, many people will be envious. This is an original SH101 from 82, which you cannot see, but I can pick it up. I'm so afraid that it will be damaged. I don't even leave it on the current. So keep it here. Just there.
Wow.
It is an original, never opened.
Look at that beauty.
Still everything running. So it's older than me. And it's, of course, well, more like a legacy item. I can't say I prefer making music with it. All the modern keyboards are more powerful, but of course, many analog fans out there will disagree. I'm sorry, I love virtual analogs. Don't kill me.
No, that's actually really cool. I am so impressed by your collection. I said it before, I'm a bit of a Roland fan. So seeing all of what you have and also the other brands that you have, it's so cool. I am limited on what gear I do use right now. I do like to split up between software and hardware, but it seems like you're doing exactly what I want to do and what many musicians aspire to or are currently doing. You find a good and equal balance between the mobility and the flexibility of software and also the inspirational side of hardware. So I think that's something that everyone should look into. It's not just about only analog. It's not just about only vintage synths. Find what inspires you and make it work.
Indeed. Actually, what is very handy in that sense is that if you use a software to compile them all together. I use Camelot Pro, but there are other software out there. For instance, the main stage of Apple. It's running on iOS main stage. Everybody uses it for the most part. That can actually run both your software and hardware together, and you can create a virtual rig with it, as if you have done with the MIDI through box and MIDI cables. It just runs that virtually. What I do with Camelot Pro is to use a powered USB hub, hook all the keyboards that I'm going to use, and the software is running on the iPad. So you can create layers, for instance, or you can create scenes, songs, playlists. It's really great. You can create backing tracks and just playing on top of them. So complete performances you design. And the designing takes long, but on the stage it works miracles. I usually use, for instance, to switch between scenes, a Bluetooth wireless MIDI foot switch. I have this one, actually. The iRig Blue board. So
Nice.
this communicates wirelessly with the iPad. So I'm just like pressing a button and everything changes. And all I'm using is either the keytar as a controller or maybe not even that, whatever I find in the studio as a MIDI controller. So right now, of course, things have been therefore easier than for, say, 20 years ago. People then had to really use a lot of cables and a lot of MIDI digging to get their instruments to communicate with each other. You're a little bit cheating on that, but it's really great. The blend of, powerful software and hardware and the flexibility of this kind of stage setup software is just immaculate, really.
We've come so far. I can't even imagine a world where we don't have the compatibility and connectivity that we have today with instruments. And I'm looking forward to what else comes out.
Yeah.
As we were saying,
we were talking about actual instruments.
Yes, we were. And I want to show off just a couple of my pieces.
Ooh. Oh, wow.
I actually had to move on from I had a 909 that barely worked, and
Mhm.
while it was cool to have it, I felt that I could take the money that I sold from that instrument and find something that's that's more practical for me. As much as I love having legacy instruments, as you had shown, having something like that, or in this case, like a DO5 instead of a D50, or even something interesting and small like an SEO2. These instruments for me, they open up the perspective of having a hardware piece of synth in front of you, but also having a lot of capabilities that analog synthesizers maybe didn't have in the past.
Indeed. So SH101, it is great, but still, I mean, I can get a much more complicated and powerful and compact and all in all useful sound out of the V-Synth GT. I mean, it's set in as a preset, for God's sake. Each time you will have to redesign a new preset on the SH101. So, I mean, I know analog guys don't agree, but I guess we
It
just like easy side.
it's okay if they don't agree. It's quite fine. I prefer digital, and I love analog as an additional synthesis that you can use to help make tracks. But digital's the future. Digital's fun. Digital's nice. Analog has its sound, but you could do so much more with granular and digital and FM and all of these different styles. So I look forward to advances in synthesizer technology.
Indeed, indeed. And you can just see it evolve. When I think back, when we started KV331, of course, I'm a childhood friend of our CEO. So I was just observing from outside. I was just barely trying to learn how to play metal and such at that time. And he was talking rocket science to me back then. But then he was talking about FM synthesis, additive synthesis, and such, trying to explain me their working principles. And now those are already so much in the past. They are staple work for all the synths out there in the market now. Everybody's keen on granular synthesis and more elastic methods to really blend, to emulate actually analog circuits and such. We will have granular synthesis with SynthMaster version 3 as well, which is hopefully going to go beta this summer. So, I mean, in a very short time, it's almost like Apple devices. When we think, we always perceive as if we had the iPad, for instance, forever. But when we think back, the first versions that were out there for us to buy was like only 10 years ago. Only 10 years ago. It's amazing that now the iPad became just so much bread and butter. It's indispensable. Any musician should have one iPad. So just
I
had
agree.
amazing, therefore.
I agree. My iPad never leaves my side. It's so useful for not just music, but for anything else on a day to day basis. If you ask anyone in the 80s and the 90s if they could have something that does what an iPad does, but also has so much musical capabilities, they wouldn't be able to wrap their head around it. Which is why I love embracing technology, and I love companies that look to integrate music with technology as much as they can.
I respect so much people who are still trying to, for instance, work with tape or analog tables that rust. I mean, I adore what they do, that commitment, that absolute love for that vintage gear. But I mean, we as sort of emerging people just don't have that luxury or that time or those resources for the most part. Just to keep up an SSL table in running order, like an SSL table from 30 years ago, how much would it cost today? Really, I mean, with a like $100 sound card, we pretty much can record. So
Yeah, we've come so far.
indeed.